Yeah, it seems like this. Here you have your microphone.
Yes.
Well, this is not your first time in Czech Republic, because I think you were here for the Karlovy Vary Film Festival in like 2008. Do you remember even that?
Well, usually my memory is pretty good. But yes, I do remember. Yes, I do.
And what was the occasion? Were you there with one of your movies, or to accept a Lifetime Achievement Award?
Yes, okay. You keep talking.
And you will be just nodding the whole time.
I'm just nod away. Oh, God. What a journey. You know what I mean? It's just to be able to kind of travel in the world and to meet so many people in so many different communities and in some sense find a common union through films, you know, in some ways. And it's the images, I think, as well. The kind of ways in which they see me through the roles itself, you know. But I live in the same city.
Your whole life?
The same city I was born in. I see some of the same friends that I had growing up. And I've lost some of those friends growing up. They passed on and they transitioned and everything. And so all those things are a part of life, but I've been very fortunate to be able to do that. I mean, just the stories that just me, guys who would tease me when I was a kid and awkward and clumsy now. It's really nice. I don't have to remake myself. I reimagine myself when I'm in San Francisco, because that's my place. Yeah.
Well, you've mentioned you growing up as a kid. What kind of TV shows or books or comic books were, because we are all here because we love like sci-fi and pop culture movies, but what's your favorite genre? What's your childhood fondest memory?
My best memory were Westerns. There was always something about Westerns, and when I did Silverado, the first Western I did, in part on that, in my work in there, was the idea of the images that I saw that we often played. I mean, the first toy that we had, and a lot of you as kids in the United States have, and that's one with, you know, guns and holsters, and all those particular things that were associated with the Western, you know. And then I think that's one of the strongest part. But I wasn't a person who was fascinated by film. I mean, if I don't become as a student and come into being as a student during that period of what we call the Black Arts Movement, then that was an incredible moment for me about using stage and using acting and performance as a way of telling stories, and kind of those stories were reimagining ourselves, and also stories that sometimes validate us who we are as well. So I think I came up in that period. If that period doesn't happen, then I don't know, in my life, in my time, I don't know whether I would have become an actor, you know? Because it was interesting from a vantage point of using theater, and I said specifically theater, as a framework of telling different stories, of validating who you are, of validating the journey of African Americans through storytelling.
Because when you see the story, you can actually identify with itself and understand it better. Do I?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, when I was doing my research for this interview, it was incredibly hard because you were in so many great movies during your life. But what I noticed was you were not afraid to like change roles, like to be a villain, to be the hero. You would try different genres, you would even, you know, sometimes you would do this artistic movie, and the next one would be Lethal Weapon, you know, this big franchise. How did you, and then you would like end up doing Lethal Weapon, and then you would go and play Mandela and get your Emmy Award for that.
Yeah.
I was wondering, how did you choose your roles?
Well, they often choose you, in a sense, you know. I think the movie, most people ask me, what is your favorite movie? This is my first major role with Sally Fields, Places in the Heart. And it's interesting because my mother, in a conversation with me, my mother was, I had great parents. I had wonderful parents, great. But my mother said, when I was living in New York, doing theater in New York, I was in a Broadway play, and I came off of that Broadway play, and I came back to San Francisco. And my mother said something to me on the journey. She said, you're going to do a movie in September that is going to be about you. And so I was sitting in my agent's office. This is before they emailed you the script and everything. I was sitting in my agent reading Places in the Heart, the movie I did with Sally Fields. And I found myself crying at the end of the movie, sitting in that office by myself, crying at the point that I finished reading the story. And I told my mother about it, and it reminded me of things that I knew. I had forgotten that I had lived with my grandparents. I didn't have it as a part of my memory, or that first sense of yourself. Smell of heat, the weight of heat rather, the smell of land, the dirt, the soil, and all those, in Georgia. And so, because I always would tell people, well, I'm from San Francisco, I said, you're from the country somewhere. You're from the country in some place, because of my mannerisms. And so, when I read that script, I called my mom, I said, Mom, I read this script, and there's so many things that came out of me in that script. But I had lived those things on that farm with my grandparents in the time that I lived on that farm. And so when I read that script, I told her about that script. And she said, you're going to do a movie in September. It's going to change your career. But what happened is the day I found out that I was going to do that movie, my mother died in an automobile accident. And the same day, so I had to go, waiting for the news to see if I had gotten the role or someone else had gotten that role. And I had to get on a plane and go identify my mother's body. And that was, because my dad was devastated. I mean, that was the love of his life. And so I remember that script particularly, that story particularly, and I often tell people that it's the most important story for me, one of the most important films, and dedicated to my mother, to be able to dedicate something to the first love, my mother, was something that was special. But Places in the Heart will always be my most signature of my most important film to me. You know, to be able to go on in the career and have that. And I remember because my grandparents were rural farmers. You know, and there's something about them, and they were special in a sense because they were poor farmers. And when September came, my mother went to school. My mother was the first to graduate from college in her family. And subsequently, all her sister and her brother went to school as well. So it changed the whole trajectory, you know. And so my work in that film is for my mom. Yeah.
Wow.